All right, today I am here in Techumai to speak to one of our colleagues who has been working for a very long time as a journalist. And we're going to look at his entire life. We know and we have heard what journalists in Africa actually go through to tell stories. And we have heard stories of journalists being attacked, some, a lot of accusations. I mean, and there is no any journalist in this world that has never been faced, I mean, either by being attacked or being accused of doing something that the public think or a group of people or section of people think is, is wrong. And so today I'm here to speak to my colleague. We are going to look at his entire life, what he has gone through telling stories about people who matter and telling stories about the challenges that people go through. I mean, Anass Sabit. Anass, you've been here for so many years now. You were born in Techumai. You got married here. Your children were born here. How is life like? How is life treating you in Techumai, having lived here for the past 30 years, over 30 years?
Well, Dutchman is home, and like you rightly said, born and bred here, schooled here to a certain level before I moved out. Coming back to work here, I know almost all the hoods and ghettos in Techiman. So, anytime duty calls, I just grab my gadgets and then move around. The people know me, I know the people, and so working here uh, is the most beautiful thing. Except that there are challenges, like we all know, when you are working with the people you live with. I mean, when you are a journalist and you have to do stories around the same people you grew up with, definitely there are some instances you might have to, make some people you grew up with feel uncomfortable because of the kind of stories you put out there. So it's a beautiful experience working in the same community you grew up from. And well, generally, I think it's a mixed feeling, positive and negative, all in the same basket. So it's wonderful working here, but definitely, like you rightly put earlier, as a journalist, you definitely have to be subjected to the sword of the people around, especially when the things you put out there doesn't suit them.
Mm. I know your background, a bit educational background. I know you did science at the Techiman Secondary School, senior high school, and you did electrical engineering,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
At the Sunyani Polytechnic. I mean, you went over to do computer science engineering
Computer
at the
engineering.
K University. Uh, uh, what really motivated you, or what really pushed you into journalism? Because anybody out there would expect that with this background, you would be looking forward to working with ECG and the rest of the institutions that actually need people with such mathematical, physics, and other knowledge that you have acquired in school. What was the motivation that you had to leave all of that and walk into journalism?
I would say it's passion. Um, it is something that I think has been in me, had been in me growing up. I love journalism. I love journalists. I remember back in junior high school, I don't miss the news. Those days, GTV. I watch a lot of international content. In 2001, when the WTC was under attack, the 9/11 event, I remember I had to spend days monitoring CNN those days. I don't know, I just love journalism. So growing up, I had it in me. But sometimes you have to move away from what you what is in you and then aspire or chase other things. I was enrolled into a science field at the senior high school level. I was good in physics and elective mathematics, so I have to further do electrical and then electronics engineering at the Polytechnic. But all these years, I don't know, there's this thing about journalism that I admire and then I love. So after school, I have to continue to do my computer engineering. But I think what actually dragged me into this field is the um, inception of Gaskia FM somewhere in 2014. The station came up and people were needed to take up the challenge to work in there. With zero experience, I realized the passion I had about journalism back in the days could drive me to be able to step in.
Probably you were having zero experience in radio.
Yes.
But I remember at the Polytechnic you were doing something on
Yes, a bit of
WordPress. I think you and one other colleague, I've forgotten the name.
Sharadin.
Good.
Yes.
And I know you were doing
Yes.
those things at the
Yes.
Polytechnic.
Yes, a bit of that. You know, like I said, if the passion is there, you find ways and means of even doing something on your own. So back at the Polytechnic, we did a lot of blogging. Those days, the blog address was in Facebook was not in the system. There was no social media handles. You have to either create your own, link or page.
I got to create mine through you guys.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember.
I remember my first blog address was sabitfigo.blogspot.com, and that page is still in existence, even though I've not been uploading contents there. But that is how the whole thing started, before even Facebook came into existence. And so, yes, even though then I didn't see myself doing anything journalism, I think what I had in me back in the days, partly fueled the creation of that page. And eventually I remember visiting Parrot FM those days in school, occasionally on their morning show with my colleague Tagore, Swale Abubakar, those days. Yes. So yes, that the passion was there. But when Gaskia FM came, I realized
Swale was the morning show host then.
Yes, it was a morning show. So I used to pass by and then see how they were doing their things, occasionally helping produce the show in a way. But that I didn't see that then as something I wanted to do, because back in school, especially if you are doing electronics engineering, all your mind is on Netco, VRA, the TOR, and all those big engineering firms. You want to complete school and try. Ghana Telecom those days, all aspiring to find jobs in those companies. So journalism, I didn't see myself doing it until after school, when Gaskia FM came around, and I realized I have to take it up and then do something to help the station, because that was the start, and the station didn't have the financial muscles to employ the big names to come and take over. So I was in Obuasi with Anglo Gold as on a contract with Subway Engineering, and I remember I had to move back down here to do this radio thing. So through the radio, I didn't start like I said. Even as at that time, I thought I was just doing something temporary, and I'll leave as and when the juicy offers come in. But along the line, I realized this is something I love doing. I don't see myself working when I'm practicing journalism or radio, because I think it's a passion. It's like a hobby. So if you want to, enjoy what you do, get into what you enjoy doing as a hobby, like something that is a hobby for you. You love doing it. So when I started, at a point I realized, even on holidays, on weekends, anytime I'm at the workplace, and even up to date, I've been working for the past 9 years, no leave. I've never gone on any leave, and I don't do holidays, I don't do weekends. Anytime the job calls me, I get out there to do it. So that made me feel this is what makes me happy. And once I'm happy doing it, I think it's worth the energy I put in there. So generally, I think this is something I dreamt of as a growing up, and for now, I think even though we all know the struggles we all go through, I have friends who tells me there are better juicy offers elsewhere. Can you kindly try and then move? But anytime I think of going there, I ask myself, okay, when I leave, what happens to the vacuum I'm gonna create when I leave the space I am occupying now? So yes, that is how the whole thing started.
Mm.
Yeah.
You've done a lot of stories in the region, and there are, before the region was created, you were doing a lot of stories, and um, you've done hundreds of stories. Which of them, which of the stories that can you always talk about and feel like you have really done justice, or you have really done a very good work to this story?
I doubt if I'll be able to single out a particular story. I have done so many stories, hundreds, like you said. Except that I remember how I traveled to Atibubu on a mission, and I had to go and do a water story. That particular story, is something that is dear to me. During the heat of COVID,
Yes.
I had to go there and then tell the story of how these residents are sharing the same water with
Animals.
cattle, animals, and those days we were told to wash our hands
Yes.
regularly using soap and water. But to this community, even the water to drink was a challenge. And you're talking of hand washing. So hand washing wasn't topmost on their priorities because water is scarce, an entire community. So I had to go there and then find out from them what they make of the call by health authorities to regularly wash their hands. They told me hand washing is not part of their their books at all because you have to preserve the little water you have for domestic
Use.
okay. So then I realized there's the need for state or local authorities to chip in and then provide them with the needed water or the portable source of water so that they'll be able to also practice hand washing then as one of the protocols, preventive protocols for COVID-19 during that period. So that story has been had a lot of attention. Local authorities coming up to do something about it, and also eventually the story won me an award. It is just one of those many stories I've done on water sanitation in my region. But recently I've done a couple of Islamic related stories. That also is something I think I love doing because I love to educate or inform people on some of the things they don't know. So going about to tell these stories, I had a lot of people telling me they didn't know a couple of things that were, told in the story until after they watched the story. So these are the stories I love doing, informing and then educating the people on some of the things they used to do. I mean, they didn't know much about, but so after watching the stories, they will confess to you that your story ABC has touched their lives.
I know that there are instances where you tell a story, I mean, you go back home and you feel like you are in heaven because you have told a story that a lot of people talk about it. I mean, the general public talk about it, and you go to social media and people are talking about it. Aside this story you told, this story that you mentioned, specifically mentioned about the water challenge, is there any other story that you go home, even though you have nothing in your pocket, you feel like the whole world is talking about you?
Yes, I remember when we did the porous borders story
Yeah.
back about 2-3 years ago. I had to ride my motorbike from here to
Sampa.
Sampa and then through Bontugu, into Cote d'Ivoire, to tell the story of how porous our borders are. The experience terrifying. That had been my longest journey on motorbike to an area I've never been to. The risk involved and everything. I remember I had to go and then return on that same day, and I missed, some very important part of the story. So I had to go back there and then return again. And so I had to go in and out to do one story.
I remember that story. You told me
Yes.
about that story.
Yes. So it is one story I think I didn't realize how impactful it had been until after I came into contact with people and they tell me the experience. I mean, what I shared. These are stories. These are things they never knew. So the impact was huge. I drained my energy, my fuel, and everything to go do that story. It is very. I mean, you may not see it as important before you start the journey, but after the whole thing, the comments that came from people who watched was enormous. And I had to also ride from Techiman to Bupe. You remember
That's a
when
very long distance.
you remember when the Bupe Bridge had some
Yes,
defects
yes,
and
yes.
the road was closed
Yes.
and people have to use the other. So I had to ride there. I remember one day around 11 a.m. I just realized, okay, why don't I go to Bupe to do this story? So I just picked my bike alone, set off, and I got to Bupe after 2 p.m. I had to get to speak to people, finish my whole report by somewhere 5:30 to get into 6. I have to come back. And on my way, my motorbike had a faulty, lights. The lighting was faulty. So I have to make sure I get home on time. I have to use my traffic indicators to signal vehicles that, yes, I'm coming. And I had to bump onto a speed ramp at a point, nearly had an accident. I survived it and I got home, drained, stressed. But when the story was aired, I felt it's worth it. So that is one thing about this work we are doing. After all the stress you go through, the story is told, the people around feel the impact, and it's, cools your heart. You feel like, yes, my journey paid off, or something like that. So it's a lot of these stories, communities we've gone to do stories about, poor classroom structures, and the next moment a certain NGO calls you and they tell you want to go and then put up a structure there. Apaso DA Basic School on the Kintampo Road is one example. I got there, the teachers told me we won't talk to you. I tried to speak with the headmaster said until the GES, allow them, they will not speak. Then I sat down and I go like, okay, I won't deal with you as teachers. I'll deal with the community folks, and then for probably some of the pupils. I did that story, and by the close of the month, I had a call that an NGO is coming in to construct a structure for them. And as I speak to you, it's almost complete. So these are some of the stories that energizes us, that propels me to do more, knowing very well that I'm able to earn results for such communities. There are countless of such examples, but for me, this is one very reason why I'm still doing this journalism thing.
I'm going to ask Sabit one important question, but before I come to that, there are recent issues cropping in here in Techima, and unfortunately, he was attacked in that particular event. This car that we are sitting on was damaged. I'm going to ask him what really happened and why he was attacked at that moment. We all saw it on social media when he shared the story that his car, he was attacked, and his car, this particular car, was damaged. How did that incident happen? What was it really about?
To tell what it was really about is going to be very difficult. But for the past 6 months, there's been this protracted chieftaincy issue in Techiman Zongo. It's more or less like a family thing because I am from the royal family.
Okay.
And there have been factions and
Within the family,
the Omanhin of the traditional council called both parties, listened to both parties, and at the end had to decide on who should, be the chief after the demise of the late Zongo chief. So that was done at the palace of the Omanhene. He chose their two brothers, same father, the elder and then the younger one. The Omanhene had to choose the older one because he feels he was the one who has, done the traditional, the routine things that needed to be done before one ascend that position to that position. So after this whole thing, I thought this whole thing is over until when that incident happened on January 20. A very terrible experience. I was seated in this car, and moments later, I realized guys were coming from all angles, holding cutlasses, stakes, and one of them approaching the car asked me to step down to get out of the car. Then I realized he was holding a cutlass, and the next moment I realized another guy came from nowhere. I didn't see him, holding a pepper spray, sprayed into the vehicle, and that got into my eyes. The pepper spray got into my eyes, so I closed my eyes, tried to open, and I realized there are other guys coming. They were not now coming towards the car. This happened in the heart of Techima and Zongo, on the streets. It's not like outskirts, in the heart of the community. And so, sensing danger, I realized if I don't move, what could happen there wouldn't be good. So I mustered courage, used the key into the vehicle, and then ignited the engine. And fortunately, I was able to start the engine. With the pepper in my eyes, I was able to move at high speed, realizing they were approaching, and I had to speed off. It was during this instant that they started throwing objects, stones, particularly at the car, hitting my windscreen. You could see here, and then the other side, and then at the back. And I had to move to a safe location and then proceed to the police station to lodge a formal complaint. And these guys have since been picked, and they are currently standing trial at the court. Honestly, as I speak to you, I won't be able to tell you this is my offense or that is my offense. But I heard people speak about, I being attacked because of my profession. They felt if they don't get me out of the way and they carry out any, attack on anybody, I have what it takes to report or to carry out the report. So, one, either they shut me down by frightening or by getting me scared, or they do only God knows what they wanted to do that particular day. So it was one, an attempt to get me out of their way to perpetrate their evil actions, or two, to seal my mouth and then make me feel if I don't stay off, whatever happens to me, it is caused by myself. So
you didn't do anything.
I don't remember doing anything. Like I said, I am a royal family from that particular gate, and it is a house matter. And both brothers who were going for the position, brothers to my father. So we say, for us, they are my fathers. But traditionally, we know that if there is a position, like a chieftaincy position, age, the eldest amongst the siblings is considered first. So based on those, traditional things, I threw my support behind the older one, feeling that is the norm. And so when the Omanhene finally brought some finality to the matter, I thought that ends it. But the other faction felt no, they had to find their way to grab the position by hook or crook. And as I speak to you now, even the matter is before the High Court, and we know very soon it will come to its logical.
How was the feeling like after the incident? Did you feel insecure?
Very insecure. Up to date, going about my work, I've taken my, extra care of myself in terms of security. I remember. Okay, so the experience has been very, terrifying. I've since taken security to my own security to a different level. Some security heads in town have told me to be careful of my movements, and I've been cautious about it since, even though those badness are currently standing trial. I don't know, I have no guarantee what could happen next. You understand? And for me as a journalist, this is just one of several experiences I've had covering elections in the past. I remember how, at a point, I was told to, stay off events organized by a certain political party in town because of, some of them being agreed at my reports in a way. Yeah, so this is just one of those, but this is the most terrifying experience I don't want to remember. And ever since, I've been very cautious in my movements, particularly my movements. But in my line of report, nothing has changed. I make sure I go about my reportage or my reporting business
Right.
same as I
All right,
always
thank
do.
you so much, Mr. Anass. I am so grateful for your time. Like you've heard, there are so many challenges that journalists go through to tell a story. So when you see a story out there, it takes so much time, so much energy. So much resources to tell that story. And you've heard how he goes about getting these stories done.
Before we wrap up, Nurdin, if you want to do proper journalism, you will definitely hurt someone. You will definitely have to tell a story that might not suit someone, either in authority or any, you know, big man in town. So these are some of the things we go through every now and then, but you have to be brave. And once you've decided to do this job, these are some of the things you should expect to go through. I have a friend who tells me, if you realize that you are doing journalism and everyone is clapping for you, then you have to question your form of stories. The kind of stories you put out there. Definitely, people should not be happy with some of the stories you put out there because of either they are engaged in corrupt activities or they are doing things that need to be concealed and you go about exposing them. So these are some of the things we know journalists go through. And so for me, yes, it's not a good experience, but it is something I expect. And this might not be the last of it. Where we are hoping things wouldn't go bad.
Thank you so much. You have to tell the good stories that definitely people will talk about. Some will not be happy story, but you have to always put a good story out there. Thank you so much. We would meet another time to tell you a different story about people out there who are doing a lot of stuff to change lives. Thank you so much, Mr. Anass. I'm so grateful.
It's my pleasure.
So that's how we end here in Techimai. Thank you so much for watching. We'll meet some other time.